the Śrī Caitanya Charitamrita starts with Vande Gurun Isha Bhaktan Ishan Isha Vatarakan Tat Prakasham Statat Shakti Krishna Chaitanya Samdikam. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami offers his obeisances to the gurus, three kinds of gurus. The Brahmana Pradakshaka Guru, the one who shows one the path, the Shiksha Gurus, and the Diksha Gurus. All are manifestations of Krishna in the world to intercept the sincere living entities and give them instruction and mantras so they can go back home, back to Godhead. And then Kaviraj Goswami says, Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Godudai Pushpavanto Chitro Shando Tamo Nudao. He says that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Nityananda have arisen on the horizon of Gauda to dissipate the darkness of ignorance and thus wonderfully bestow benediction upon all. Just as you can imagine the sun and moon arising simultaneously. When the sun rises or when the moon rises, they light the world and they show us mundane objects like pots and plates. You can see them with your eyes then when the sun comes up. Otherwise, without light, our eyes are useless. But Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu and Lord Nityananda reveal through their light the innermost chambers of the heart so that we can see our best interest in life. And the way they do that is they reveal the two Bhagavatas. One Bhagavata is the pure devotee who's absorbed in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. That's called the person Bhagavata. And the second Bhagavata that Kaviraj Goswami mentions that they reveal is the book Bhagavata. Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu, as is mentioned in the Śrī Caitanya Manjusha, considered the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam to be the pinnacle of all Vedic literatures. Arajo Bhagavan Rajesha Tanayasta Dhamma Vṛndāvana Ramya Kachalupasana Vraja Vidu Vargena Vokalpita Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Pramanam Amalam Prema Pumartu Mahan. Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu held that the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam was the spotless Purana and that it revealed the highest truth. So where does the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam come from? We know that, of course, it's an incarnation of Krishna and it just manifests. It's eternal, but it manifests from time to time in this world and it comes through various agents. We hear the Bhagavatam in the pages of the Bhagavatam itself, and the discussion ensues between Shukadeva and Parikshit Maharaj. And then it's recounted again at Naimisharanya, which is where the Bhagavatam begins. And that is a discussion between Sutta Goswami and the sages at Naimisharanya, and describing what Sutta Goswami heard. There are stories within stories. These are called nested stories. And we telescope into various pastimes and instructive tales throughout the Bhagavatam, thus capturing the mind and purifying us. The Bhagavatam presents every psychological condition of a human being. And when we hear it, then we're indemnified from having to suffer various kinds of psychological conditions which cause perturbation. And the Bhagavatam presents them and then rectifies them in the light of our connection to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, we actually find solace in hearing the nested stories throughout the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. In the 5th chapter of the first canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, there's a very important discussion that goes on between Srila Vyasadeva and Narada Muni. Of course, Narada Muni, the great spaceman, gets revealed in these several chapters in the beginning of the first canto of the Bhagavatam. As we know, he's an integral part of the various pastimes of Krishna in Vṛndāvana and elsewhere. And who is he? Well, that's revealed in this section. But the context of the story and the revelation of Narada Muni, that is the place where he's revealed, is that Śrīla Vyasadeva, who is the literary incarnation of Krishna, he's empowered specifically to give the world the transcendental knowledge in a way that they can digest it. And of course, Śrīla Vyas means an editor. Śrīla Dvaipayana Vyasadeva is the modern Vyas. And he, in the 5th chapter, actually at the end of the 4th chapter, he's lamenting that although I've compiled the Vedas, he arranged for them to be divided, and he entrusted each one of the Vedas, we call it Trivedi because one of the Vedas is more like voodoo, and so the sages don't really talk about it too much hocus pocus. The other ones deal with mantras and hymns that talk about the absolute truth to some degree. Other sections talk about adjusting one's life here in the material world. And then the transcendental aspect is highlighted like headlines on a newspaper when you come to the Upanishads. The Upanishadic texts are terse, but they give us an indication of the difference between matter and spirit. As an example, in the Śrī Upanishad, which we're privy to because Śrīla Prabhupāda brought it out, we hear Yastu Sarvani Bhutani Atman Evanupashyati, that we are parts and parcels of the Lord. Yasmin Sarvani Bhutani Atmai Vadbud Vijanataha Tatrako Mohoka Shoka Ekatvamanupashyataha. One who is in knowledge sees the difference between the body and the self, respects all beings, knowing that they're part and parcel of the Supreme. And there's some indication also of the personality of Godhead. For instance, Hiranmayena Patrena. We got Kumbh Mela starting over here. Hiranmayena Patrena Satyasa Pihitam Mukam Tatvam Bhushana Pavrenu Satyadharmaya Drishteye. The devotee in this verse is praying to the Lord, please remove the effulgence of your transcendental rays so I can see your form of bliss. And the Upanishads then are summarized again in the Vedanta Sutra in even terser words, which are actually meant as placeholders for great thinkers and sages. They can look at them and understand this is a notation to be unpacked and given commentary. Therefore, great acharyas from all different sections of the religious world will comment on the Vedanta Sutra. For years, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas didn't have a commentary because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considered the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam the natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. Natural commentary means that it's given by the author himself. So Śrīla Vyasadeva is the one who compiled the Vedanta Sutra, and then he, forgive the term, unpacked it in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam when he compiled that. However, when we enter the 5th chapter of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, we find that Śrīla Vyasadeva is morose. Anybody here ever been morose?
Yes.
Just 2 or 3 people?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a French word.
I feel like it is? It's French?
Morose.
And what is the root meaning? Do we have a research team here today or no?
Internet is...
No internet? Did you bring your... Where's Sachi? Did she bring her dictionary? She said she was going to bring it. Okay.
They found it.
Okay, you found it? Please say it. Got to be on your toes, research department. On your toes.
Having a sullen and gloomy disposition.
A sullen? sullen and gloomy disposition. So Śrīla Vyasadeva had given some commentary on the Vedanta Sutra as a precursor to the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. When Narada Muni appears, Śrīla Vyasadeva has an incomplete version of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, something like Bhagavat Purana, but it's not Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And when Narada arrives, and that's what he does, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hrida Sharajana Tishtati Brahmayan Sarvabhutani Yantra Rudrani Mayaya, is within everyone's heart and reveals to Narada where he needs to go. And just as he arrives, his disciple, Śrīla Vyasadeva, offers him a seat. Narada's holding his veena and slightly smiling as Śrīla Vyasadeva reveals to him that he has a conundrum. I've followed strictly all my vows. I've done my utmost to present to the world the message of the Supreme, and I still feel incomplete. And then Śrīla Narada Muni chastises his disciple and said, what you've done is actually abominable. He uses the word jagupsitam, which means it's like really bad. He said, because you've misled people. You talked about karma kanda, and even you've talked about self-realization, but he says, naish karmyam apyachuta bhava varjitam nashobate jnanam alam niranjanam kutakmana shashvara padram ishvare nacharpitam karma yarapya karanam. He said, self-realization without the conception of God, achuta, the personality of God, he says, is nashobate. It doesn't shine. It's not beautiful. It's nothing that will lift us above the mire of material existence ultimately. And we hear this also in the 10th canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam when the sages are praying to Lord Krishna within the womb. And they say that until somebody comes to understand the lotus-eyed Supreme Personality of Godhead, they can see and develop a relationship with the Lord. Then no matter, aruya Kṛṣṇa parampadam tata patantyato nadrita yushmarangraya. Yadrishja means for this self-realization, people try really hard. They'll perform severe austerities and restrict their senses. This is called yadrishja. Aruya Kṛṣṇa sounds like hard work. Kṛṣṇa. But still, because until they've come to the point of establishing a relationship, a sweet relationship with the lotus-eyed Personality of Godhead, then no matter what position of liberation they may have attained, patantyada, they'll fall back down again because they have no standing, actually, in reality. And Narada Muni tells Vyas tatonyata kinchana yadbabakshita pratagdrishash krita rupanamabi. Pratagdrishash means anything that's separate in vision from the Lord that you describe. Yatonyata kinchana, anything that you describe. Kinchana means anything. Tatonyata kinchana yadbabakshita. If you teach this, if you write it, and it's pratag. Pratag means separate. Pratagdrishash krita rupanamabi. If it's separate in form and description and connection from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he says then, labeta vata hata nauri vaspadam. So vata ahata means a big wind, and now means a boat. So the person who hears this, anything that's separate in vision from the Personality of Godhead, that person is like a boat it's on the water, has no resting place, and it gets blown by the wind from one place to the next. So he said, similarly, the consciousness of a living entity, unless he's able to hear directly about the personality of Godhead, his pastimes, his form, his qualities, then anything you describe will actually disturb the consciousness of that living entity. Nakarichit kwapish tadushtita matir. It creates a bad intelligence, and it blows you around from one place to the next in the material world. That's how important the sound vibration is. What we hear is what we become. And whatever we take in through our ears, it ends up having an effect in our heart. The Śrī Caitanya says, Anyadevahur sambhavad, anyadahura sambhavat, iti shushrumadhiranam yenas tadvichakshide. One result is obtained by hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and a completely different result, which we can catalog and describe quite vividly, is obtained by hearing about that which is not supreme. So he tells Narada also that although there are literary works in the world that people admire, Nayad bachas chitrapatam harer yasho jagat pavitram pragrinita karichit tadvayasam tirtam ushanti manasa nayatra hangsa niramantu shikshaya. He says that these works, although they're embellished, they have literary devices. There's alliteration and metaphor. There are dozens of ways that you can use literary devices to stimulate the mind. And people listen to poetry all the time, and then they... you're supposed to go like this when you go to try it. When the beat poets would say their poems, and everyone like, this is how they clap. It's cooler, I guess. And then you have sophisticated writings. There are all kinds of authors that people admire all over the world. Joseph Conrad, Dostoevsky, and modern ancient writers. People read historical works and sift through them and find out the beautiful literary devices that use. Shakespeare is notable, the way he turns phrases. And then we hear from Narada that all these things, these so-called ornaments, actually, he said these are all like places of pilgrimage for crows. And crows will eat anything. I mean, I don't mind crows. I think they're perfectly nice birds. But the Bhagavatam doesn't appreciate their habits that much. They'll eat anything. So those who are non-discriminating, which is a weird way to say it, those who don't discriminate well and listen to anything that's not related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they're compared by the Bhagavatam like crows. They go and eat this and that and the other thing. Whereas, Nayatra Hangsa Niramantu Shikshaya, those whose hearts have become purified, they'll only take the best of literatures, which are about Uttama Shloka, which are about Krishna, and they don't want to hear anything else. So they're like the swans. Swans can take a mixture of milk and water and just drink the milk and leave the water behind. Possible?
Yeah.
Well, Badri Narayan Maharaj once said in a class, he said, I always wondered if that was true or not. Then I met a biologist from the University of Michigan, and I asked him, is it possible? And the biologist said, oh yeah. He said, actually, swans have an enzyme in their beak. And when they take milk and water together, the milk coagulates in their beak, and the water goes to the side, and they can just swallow the coagulation of milk. Haribol. In any case, poetically, he calls the devotees swans, because they just take the essence of life and they know what's important. So they only consider those literatures which glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the Yad Vichaschita Pratam Harerisho Jagat Pavitram, it's not anything but the glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He says, Tadvag Visargo Janataga Viplavo Yasmin Pratishloka Abadyavatyapi Namanyanantasya Shonkitanya Shinvanti Gayanti Grananti Sadhava. Narada is glorifying the Bhagavatam now, and he says that the Bhagavatam, Viplava, means like it causes something to completely transform. We hear it's translated the word revolution, but it's like things get turned over completely. So when one hears the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, those who are inclined to hear the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam are known to be purified souls, and for everyone else who hears it, it actually completely changes their conception of life. And then they become aware of actual reality and what's most important in life. This is the transformative power of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It can completely purify the heart and reveal to anyone the spiritual world. Tadvag visargo janataga viplavo yasmin pratishlokam avadyavatipi. And although the verse mentions that this literature, although perhaps it's imperfectly composed, which actually isn't true. The Bhagavatam is the most eloquent of all literatures. It contains the most sophisticated of Sanskrit poetry that's known anywhere in the world. The greatest Sanskrit scholars in the world, secular Sanskrit scholars, will look at the Bhagavatam and just marvel at the literary devices that are used there. In fact, one such scholar who was famous at Harvard University who looked it over, and he just shook his head and he said, "This puts Shakespeare to shame." And Radhika Prabhu, who studied Sanskrit and also obviously the Bhagavatam, that's how he learned to read. Come over, son. Let's learn to read. We'll start on the Bhagavatam. Talks about the various kinds of sophistication of the language throughout the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It comes from a culture that is otherworldly, literally. It's not from this world, and that's what this verse says, Tadvag visargo janataga viplavo. It's not from this creation. It's not created. It eternally exists. It's not different from Kṛṣṇa, but it manifests in this world. So you can imagine Kṛṣṇa, all his superlatives, and when he appears as a literature, what it's like. What it's like is that if one actually hears it, it transforms one's mind. Viplava means that, okay, I'm in, I give up. And this is one of the main points of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, that it can transform the heart of anyone who hears it. And to show that it's a completely transcendental literature, has nothing to do with the material world, which is what's stated in the Bhagavatam itself, Dharma projita kaitavo tra paramo nirmat saranam satam. It's not meant for ordinary people, it's meant for people who are non-envious. And it doesn't cheat. It doesn't cheat because it doesn't offer any material reward, and it also only presents the perfect attitude of selfless service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the goal of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. No enticements, material enticements. This is for people who, as my janitor friend at St. Louis Airport, Swap, his name was Swap Shop. Everyone called him Swap. And he used to sell books back to us if people would buy him and leave him. And he used to say, "I don't play games. I put the toys on the shelf." So when we come to the Bhagavatam, the toys are on the shelf. No more playing games. Dharma projita kaitavo. It says this is straightforward, pure thing. The very essence, the highest thing you can possibly get. And this is the standard of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It's not from the material world, it's from the spiritual world. Tadbhag visargo janataga viplavo yasmin prati shlokam avadyavatyapi namanyanantasya shonkitanya shunvanti grayanti grananti sarva. It's full of the names, fame, pastimes of Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Narada instructs Śrīla Vyasadeva that, first of all, you blew it. You gave all these literatures, and this could make us feel better too, because there's a perennial endeavor to present Krishna consciousness amongst all of us to others in such a way that it will be accepted. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's always a concern. How's this going to go over with this audience? Can I actually say, God? In many places you can't. In fact, in America, if your bylaws happen to indicate that you believe in God, you're not getting any funding from government or from any corporations, because it's a secular world there, and people object to it. So in presenting Krishna consciousness, oftentimes we're trying to adjust. It's like, what is the line? How can we stay right on the line? And then coax them over the line eventually. Known sometimes as bridge preaching. So Vyasadeva was the first to do this. And he came out with the Mayapur, which is kind of a page turner. Like, let's make a novel. And everyone's like, wow, this is a story. There's a war in here. I could listen to this. And then he slips in the Bhagavad Gita. But Narada didn't appreciate it very much. Not at all, in fact. He said, you've presented karma kanda. And he said, although there are some transcendental aspects to these literatures you've created, you've given people enough excuses to take advantage of the loopholes and just say, oh yeah, I'll just stay in the material world. It's a tendency of the living entity who's conditioned by the modes of material nature is to look for any excuse not to wake up and just turn over to the other side. Even the alarm's going, he's like, okay. So he said, you did that, and you've done a great disservice to people in general by doing this. So Śrīla Vyasadeva, sincere disciple, what should I do? And Narada instructs him, now you have to directly tell the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because only by this will people be able to rise above the dread disease of the material world, which is kama, or lust. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 10th canto, we hear, Vikriditam vraja vidubiraham cha Vishnu, shradhanvitona shinuyada tavarnayadya, bhaktim param bhagavati pratilabhya kamam, hridrogam ashvapahinot charina dhira. It's confirmed by Shukadeva Goswami that if anybody hears the direct pastimes of Krishna, especially Vrajavadu, their loving pastimes, the playful pastimes between Lord Krishna and the gopis in Vṛndāvana, such a person, if he hears in the right context, means Shraddhanvito, means the framework has to be created for the person so they don't think it's ordinary. It has to be clearly understood that these are transcendental activities. This is God. It's not an ordinary boy and girl interacting. If one has that context through good guidance, and one hears these pastimes, that bhaktim param bhagavati pratilabhya kamam hridrogam ashvapahinot yacharena dhira means that the dread disease of the heart, which is kama, it afflicts every living entity. Krishna confirms in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, kama esha, krodha esha, rajaguna samudbhava. When Arjuna says, why is everybody so messed up? And Krishna says, it's rajagun, it's kama. That's the problem. And the Bhagavatam is the only literature in the world that can undo that. Nothing else. There's no other solvent in the world that will get that stain off the heart of the conditioned soul. We want sense gratification. We want lusty dealings. Why? Because it's there in the spiritual world, but now we've got ourselves in a bind. Because what's in the spiritual world as Sadhini, Hladini, and Samvit gets translated in the material world through Rajagun, Tamagun, and Sattvagun. It's the same energies perverted, reversed, and you get Hlada Tapatraya, which means those energies from the spiritual world that gave bliss, that give the beautiful forms of the spiritual world and complete cognizance of one's relationship with the Supreme, they get perverted into Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And it makes all the forms of the material world. And one becomes completely lost in the illusion of the material world, unable to extricate oneself until one hears Bhagavatam. And therefore, it's mentioned in the 7th chapter of the 1st canto, Anartho Pasanam Sakshad Bhakti Yoga Madhoksaje, Lokasya Ajanato Vidmam Chakre Sattvata Samhitam. Śrīla Vyasadeva knew this, especially after he met Narada Muni, who urged him, like, go further. You have to, just say it. Just preach. Just come out and just tell him. Go straight forward and tell him Krishna's God. He plays in the spiritual world. Tell everything. And after he heard from his guru and he presented it, he brought out the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So he went into trance. He went to Shamyaprasa, which is, the word means it's actually as far as you can throw a danda, the place where he lives. His ashram is as big as how far you can throw a danda. Well, I guess if you're an Olympic javelin thrower, it's a pretty big ashram. But it's by the river Saraswati, and it's surrounded by berry trees. And he has his ashram there. I've always been attracted to that idea that there's some place, a refuge, where Śrīla Vyasadeva went. And that place is not affected by the 3 modes of material nature. I wish my house was like that. And he goes inside, and then he goes into trance. And in his trance, he directly sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He sees the external energy of the Lord who's under the control of Krishna. And Krishna never comes under the control of his external energy. However, the jivas, samohita jivas, they're being oppressed by this external energy. He sees all this very clearly. And he also sees, by the mercy of his spiritual master, and this is another indication, and there are many throughout the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, of the power of the parampara. We're not independently powerful, or nor do we become independently realized. We become aware of the spiritual world, or even of ourselves, by the mercy of the Guru Parampara. And because he followed his Guru and was faithful to him, Yasya Devi Para Bhaktir Yata Devi Tatagarao Tasyaite Katita Hyarta Prakashanti Mahatmanaha. Does everyone know that verse? You should memorize it, because my godbrother Guru Kripa once asked Prabhupada, what's the most important verse in the Vedas? All the Vedas. Prabhupada said, what do you think? And Guru Kripa didn't know, so Prabhupada said, Yasya Devi Para Bhaktir Yata Devi Tatagaru, which means when you have implicit faith in both Krishna and the Guru, then all the imports of the Vedic literatures are automatically, simultaneously revealed to you. That's how Śrīla Vyasadeva got his power, through Guru Parampara, abiding by the orders of his spiritual master. After seeing the pastimes of Krishna, then he came out of his trance and he revealed to the world the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the complete form of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And it's that Bhagavatam that Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu held as the standard for devotional service. It's the personification of Krishna, as Sutapa Prabhu pointed out this morning, Krishna Swab Damo Pagate Dharmaganadi Bisaha Kalo Nashta Drishamesha Punar Narko Danodita. Just after Krishna left the world for his own abode, then to fill the darkness again, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam then appeared. and it's non-different from Krishna. So, when the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam appeared in the world, then we have the life of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu, who personifies the Bhagavatam. We know that Śrīla Prabhupāda, when he was in Vṛndāvana, and he was considering how to carry out his mission to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, embarked on the translation and commentation on the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam before he would leave Vṛndāvana. There's a picture of Śrīla Prabhupāda holding one of his volumes of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. He's holding it up like this. I have it somewhere in one of our slide decks. But it reminds me of him leading the charge into the battlefield. And that's exactly what he did. He spent the time in Vṛndāvana typing. In Chippiwada, the very pious brahmana who gave Prabhupada a flat where he could do his work. Prabhupada had a typewriter. Prabhupada typed with 2 fingers, like this. And he did the owner of the flat, that Prabhupada was in there, and what was he doing? Typing. He said, all day typing. And another account of Śrīla Prabhupada in Vṛndāvana was that he was also typing. And there was one person that used to sometimes bring Prabhupada prasadam to his room, but Prabhupada was so absorbed in writing the Bhagavatam in his commentary for the first canto that sometimes he just had to leave the prasadam outside the door. As Prabhupada didn't even answer the door because he was in samadhi, typing the commentaries to the Bhagavatam. When he had it in hand, then he brought it out. But what did he write? In the beginning of the Bhagavatam, he wrote the biography of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu. Because the life of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu follows the Bhagavatam. He exemplifies the Bhagavatam. And so Prabhupada then came to America and he brought with him only Bhagavatam, and you can hear on the Jaladuta, because he wrote down the words and we have them now, what his thoughts were. And that was that let people hear this transcendental message of the Bhagavatam. Only by that will they be able to come out of darkness. And then he quoted, Shrinvatam Svakata Kṛṣṇa. Actually starts, Shushrusho Sharadhanasya Vasudeva Kata Rishi, Sadmahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtana Shedvana, Shrinvatam Svakata Kṛṣṇa Punya Shravada Kirtana, Hrityan Taksto Hibhadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam, Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavatyutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki, Tada Rajas Tamo Bhava Kama Lobhadayashtaye, Chaitaitar Navidam Stitam Sakte Prasidati, Evam Prasanna Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogata, Bhagavad Tattva Vijnana Mukta Sangas Chayate, Vidyate Hridaya Grantish Chyante Sarva Samshaya, Shyante Chasya Karmani Dushta Eva Manishvare. These verses tell the complete process of devotional service. They're all brought out by the Bhagavatam, or induced by the Bhagavatam. Because when one serves the Bhagavat, the person Bhagavat, one gets the inclination to hear the book Bhagavat, which is the great wealth of life. If you have hunger or a desire to hear transcendental messages, as Prabhu was saying this morning, this is the indication of your advancement in devotional service. There's a one-to-one correlation. Jiva Goswami says, it's easy to judge how advanced you are in devotional service by how eager you are to hear transcendental message of the Bhagavatam. And so if Bhurijan Prabhu once said he was very busy writing in Vṛndāvana, and people would come unannounced to his door, which happens in Vṛndāvana. And he didn't have time, but he also didn't want to be rude. So oftentimes he'd just pull a book off the shelf and say, let's read a little bit. And people oftentimes said, yeah, I have to go now. But when one makes advancement by serving a pure devotee, then one gets an inclination to hear the Bhagavat, and then Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. This is how we get spiritual credit, is by hearing the Bhagavatam, just by listening, submissively hearing. And then Krishna within the heart, he's vidhunoti, which means that he's our benefactor and he does something for us. He helps remove the last vestiges, hopefully they're the last ones, the last vestiges, I guess that's what a vestige is, of desire connections to the material world from the heart, just by hearing. And a vidhunoti is a kind of device through which you can clean cotton. It has cords that are pulled taut. I think that's spelled T-A-U-T. Like they're stretched tight. And then you put the unclean cotton on top, and the cords are vibrated. You vibrate them somehow there's some way that they get stimulated and they move. And that causes all the impurities in the cotton to fall through the cracks. And then you get white fluffy cotton on top. This is called a vidhunoti. And Krishna is also called vidhunoti. So when you hear the Bhagavatam, Krishna within the heart helps to clean the impurities. He sorts them out for us. This is also indicated by Kapila, who mentions in his description of devotional service that devotional service is much like the digestion process. When you eat food, do you know how it's digested?
No idea.
You never thought about it once, right? It's like, can I have a little more, please? Sure. And then it gets digested automatically. And that means it gets distributed to all the right parts of the body. The glucose goes to the brain, and various other nutrients go to other parts of the body quite efficiently. And similarly, when one performs devotional service, particularly by hearing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, then naturally one's material desires, the subtle material body, becomes dissolved. One becomes liberated by hearing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And then he says, Nashta prayeshu badrishu. Almost completely, one can see that the material desires are gone. And then it's like when you take medicine sometimes. You can tell you're getting better. Actually, it takes a few days sometimes before you can tell. If you've ever been ill and then you're given some medicine, and then you take it and you think, I have no idea if this is working or not because I still feel sick. But then you start to sense that maybe I feel a little better. I can't tell if I'm imagining it or not, or I'm just in a better mood today. And then you get to the point where, yeah, I'm definitely better, but I'm not completely better. Nashta prayeshu abhadrishu. Almost all the dirty things are gone. I can still see a few floating around, but I'm definitely improved. I can see it for myself. One can understand directly that I'm improving. But then it continues. As one continues to hear the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, prayeshu nityam bhagavata seva. There's nashta prayeshu badrishu nityam bhagavata sevaya. I'm sorry, I'm transposing verses now. Nashta prayeshu badrishu nityam bhagavata sevaya. Bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Then one comes to the point of steadiness, naishtiki. Prabhu this morning talked about the unsteady devotional service and six obstacles that one has to cross over. Sleep is the first one. Laya means when you're performing your bhajan and then because the brain, it's called psychological atheism. I say I'm a theist, but then when it comes to, here's God, I'm just not interested. I'd rather go to sleep and not hear about it. This is an anartha, a very deep anartha. And then there comes a distraction. I'm attracted to everything else but what I'm sitting with right now. And Prabhu was trying to, coax us to be in the moment, stay absorbed right now. But the distraction is an addiction to Rajaguna. I like it. I want to be distracted. Anything that distracts me, I like that. So giving up that anartha, this is part of the purification process. And then the next one comes, and it's spelled usually M-E-H or sometimes M-Y-E-H. You know how somebody asks you, how was it? And you go, meh. Meh just means like, meh. So it's one syllable, meh. And so you have the Bhagavatam, you have Krishna's pastimes, Krishna books all there, Bhagavatam's there, Chaitanya Charitamrita, everything, and the mind goes, meh. I'm just not into it. This is an anartha, because Krishna's all attractive. He's the soul of our soul. Atmanam akilatmanam. I'm attracted to my soul. I'm attracted to my body because I'm the soul in the body, and that's the only reason I like the body. As soon as I leave the body, I don't like it anymore. It's just a pile. And what to speak then, Shukadeva Goswami, how attractive actually is Krishna, because he's the soul of our soul. Atmanam akilatmanam. But in my conditioned state, I'm not attracted to him. Is everyone okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just go a little longer.
Please.
And then we can have more discussions.
Please.
So then we get the anarthas of the innate attraction of the senses to their objects. It's natural because these senses, as the Hamsa Avatar had instructed to the four Kumaras who wanted to know why it was so difficult to get out of the material world for the mass of people. And Hamsa Avatar explained how the senses are part of the material world, and so is the mind. And when one comes out of the womb, the senses become externalized, and they're inextricably connected to the objects of their desire. They have a correlated existence. They're already connected. So you may have noticed that if you see certain types of objects in the world, you just look at it and go like, yeah. You may go, no, don't look that way, and the mind's going, no, that's where I go. That's where I'm connected. So how does one come out of that? This is a very deep anartha, to be connected to the material nature. And Hamsa Avatar said, it's not that you detach the mind from the sense objects, but you detach yourself from your mind and see that you're not your mind. All that takes place by the process of hearing Bhagavatam, because we have a connection to the real source of sense enjoyment. We have to have sense enjoyment. I had come in contact with an extraordinary person when I was in Dallas. She was from a family that came down 4 generations of Baptists, born-again Christians. And her husband is a Baptist minister. And they're very involved in their church. But then somehow or other she got attracted to Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu. Inexplicable. And she had an English teacher. She was going to night school, taking an English class, and it happens that the English teacher was a devotee. He didn't announce himself. He never said Hare Krishna. But she thought, this is the most amazing person I've ever encountered. There's something about him. So she went up to him after class one day and said, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but like, you're different. You have qualities I've never seen before in anybody. And he goes, yeah, I'm Hare Krishna. And she said, what's that? And he said, well, you can come to our place. And she told me how she walked in and she saw Śrī Caitanya. And at first she was repulsed because form and like you can't see God. If you look at Christian tracts, which I've seen a lot of because people used to hand them to me all the time to try to save me from going to hell. And it would have a picture of a throne, and then there was an effulgence, but there was no form ever. And of course, that's the way it goes in the world. Nobody's able to reveal the form of God because they don't have the information. And that comes from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. However, step by step, she became completely attached to the deities, to the devotees, to devotional service. And then I met her, and we got into long-term talking back and forth, and she wanted to become a devotee and get initiated. So then it turned out that she got ready for initiation over time. And then I had to go perform an initiation ceremony, and her whole congregation from the Baptist church was coming to the Hare Krishna temple for the first time. Her husband, who is a Baptist minister, had written me a 10-page letter telling me all the things that were wrong with what we were doing. But somehow or other it was still going on. And if you can imagine such a circumstance, and I don't know about all of you, but preparing for a talk, I always like to know my audience. But in this case, because the audience was devotees, and then people from a Baptist church who probably didn't like me that much, at least I knew one person didn't, and who were experiencing the deities, what to speak of Radha Kalachandji, for the first time ever. And so in my mind, I was preparing, I always do before I go to speak somewhere, my mind's churning, like how am I going to deliver this message? What's the audience? What's the right pitch I should make? Not right pitch, that didn't sound right. At what pitch should I tune my voice and the message so that they'll hear it properly? And so I started thinking about, like, can I say it in Christian terms? And I looked at a few Christian churches, and there was nothing there. There was a cross, and that's it.
Yeah.
There's not even anybody on the cross in Baptist church. In Catholic churches, you get all the details, but that's it. And so my mind I was thinking about, in very stark terms, like how could I present this philosophy, what to speak of an initiation. Don't get me started with a fire ceremony, because Christians have a thing about fire, apparently. So my mind was like going through all this as I flew into the Dallas airport, and I got into the ashram kind of late at night, woke up, went to Mangal Artik. And if you've ever been to the Dallas temple, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I mean, he never cut back on details. You know, he always did everything first class. And that temple, it's the most ornate, polished example of a, interior of a temple you could ever imagine. Everything's perfectly arranged, including there's a lighting system there where when the sun starts to come up, the light in the room comes up at the same time. And then all the pastimes of Krishna are revealed on all the walls. So there I am in this mindset of how do you talk about Krishna consciousness in the context of a Baptist audience. And then, Mangal Artik, there's incense going. People come and smear an oil on your hand like, whoa! Here, smell this, flower. And then you look at Krishna's pastimes, and there he is, cohorting with his friends, dancing with gopis. The contrast was so stark. I was sitting there chanting japa, and I was thinking, this is all-out sense gratification. It's what everyone's looking for. It's just a wave, the tidal wave of the most, powerful, sensual stimuli that you could ever imagine in your world. But it's all spiritual. But it's a world apart from walking in a church where there's one cross. And that's all you get. And it's heaven or hell. And that's it. Nothing else. And so I was just appreciating Anyareva Hursambhavad, Anyara Hurasambhavad. There's such a contrast between the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavat culture, what comes out from the revelation of Srila Vyasadeva in the Bhagavatam to bring us the sense gratification that we need in order to get away from the material world. There's a concept in physics called escape velocity. And in order to leave a particular planet, like in case you're thinking of getting in a rocket and getting out of here real quick anytime soon, you have to measure the circumference of the body you're leaving. Like the Earth has a circumference for all you flat earthers. And there's it creates a kind of gravitational pull according to the size. And then you have to have a thrust commensurate with what it takes to fight against the force to actually get out of the atmosphere. These things have to be measured. That's why we say, such and such was a rocket scientist, because you have to figure these things out. You don't just willy-nilly shoot a rocket up, but to speak of get in it. So to get out of the material world, we require a certain thrust. And self-realization doesn't do it. Just self-realization, it doesn't get us far enough. This is, Bhagavatam says, Arūya Kṛṣṇa Paraṁpada. You can try for this on your own, but you're not going to make it out of the material world. You'll fall back down again into because of the attraction for the variety in the material world, which is a reflection. Urvamula Ashvatam Avyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavid. 15th chapter Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, spiritual world's reflected down here, all the variety. What you're looking for is not here, it's in the spiritual world. But how to get there is through the Bhagavatam. It is the spiritual world, and it gives all the sense gratification of the spiritual world packaged through sound, vibration. And then when it comes through the ears, it transforms. So that's the Nashta Prayashu Badrishu. One is able to overcome the 6 obstacles to Nishta. And that's why Bhagavatam then says, Nashta Prayashu Badrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. By hearing Bhagavatam, you can actually come to the most amazing position in life, which nobody else has from any other quarter of the world, which is Nishta. You can be fixed. And Nishta is cognate with the word stand in English. It means you have a place to stand, and you can't be pushed around. You have a standing in the world. And that's where you get a standing in the spiritual world by hearing Bhagavatam. It means also you can stand on your own 2 feet. Kamadinam katina katita palita durnideshas tesham jatamayina karuna natrapa nopashanti utsridaitanata yarupate samprata labdabhudis tamayata shananam ambayam mamniyung shvatmadhasye. The devotee prays that, Krishna, I'm taking shelter of you and I want service from you only. And he laments that he actually asked the question, for how long and how many ways have I served the bad masters of my senses? They never gave me time off. They're bad masters. They never gave me mercy. And I obeyed them without question, but no more. Now I've transferred my attention and my work to you, Krishna. I only want service to you. That can only happen when you know who Krishna is, and you know that he's a person, and he's available through the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So when we hear the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, then we're able to overcome these 6 obstacles, the innate desire within our heart to stay in the material world, not being attracted to spiritual sound vibration, all of that, our heart transforms, and then we come to this point of Nishta. And then it moves from there into the positive side, like when you're rolling, trying to push a rock up a hill, you finally get to the top. When it starts to roll down the other side on its own, this is Ruchi. So we come from Nishta, we get a standing, and then the nectar, as Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, in the Madhurya Kadambini starts to flow. And then it's very easy to bring one's attention away from the material world and back into Krishna consciousness. But after Ruchi comes Asakti, which is a rare state because it means that you have no other interest at all except for Krishna. And at that point, it's very hard to take your attention away from the Bhagavatam and put it on anything else. Because you're so attached to the Bhagavatam, nothing else matters. And from asakti, then bhava starts to manifest naturally within the heart, where the heart is touched, as Chaitanya Mahāprabhu says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, by a ray of the internal energy of the Lord from the spiritual world, which comes from the Bhagavatam. And that internal ray melts the heart, so that one can then start to actually experience inwardly the pastimes of the Lord within the spiritual world. It starts to appear in a theater near you, very near you, actually in your heart, coming soon, on the platform of your own heart. And then from there, of course, from bhava, then prema in due course of time manifests in the heart of the devotee. So this is the most rare opportunity in the world. People could not possibly understand what it is, what the Bhagavatam is. And when Prabhupada brought the Bhagavatam to America, he had to build from the ground up a theater in which people could come and get purified enough so they could sit down long enough and hear Bhagavatam. Shyamasundar Prabhu told me that, in the beginning, all they had was Prabhupada reading to them, because books were not mass-produced. They had the Bhagavatam that he brought on the boat. But mostly, he said, Shyamasundar Prabhu, who was responsible single-handedly, along with one other friend, as representatives of Owsley Stanley, who was the first manufacturer of LSD legally, who made millions of doses of LSD, and Shyamasundar Prabhu and his friend traveled all over the world and distributed it. And he showed me on a map how the counterculture started in their wake, including the Beatles showing up with psychedelic clothes and everywhere else that they distributed LSD. I'm just saying that this was part of the culture, and even from that culture, walking in, hearing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, they became, these great souls and early pioneers transformed into pure devotees of the Lord by hearing the message of the Bhagavatam. I remember when I first came to the temple in San Francisco, I was a big fan of the Bhagavad Gita because I had gotten a small copy of the Bhagavad Gita, just translations from a friend in school in 1972. And I read it again and again and again, and then I got a BTG, and I saw, there's a Bhagavad Gita as it is. I better get that. And I went to the bookstore, Shambhala Books in Berkeley, California, and I got that copy, and I read that again and again. But Bhagavatam, when I came to the temple and I saw all these stories and pictures, I was like, what is all this? Philosophy. I couldn't understand it. And in fact, I couldn't even understand the deities, because it seemed like a foreign concept to me to see deities. I was more appreciative of the flowers on the altars than the deities. But I can remember the moment of being in the San Francisco temple. It was a beautiful all-white temple room. It was very ornate because it used to be a funeral home where the caskets were kept for people to view bodies. Upstairs was the embalming room where we installed the kitchen. And I can remember our temple president, Bhutatma Prabhu, was reading from the first canto of the Bhagavatam, and he was talking about the queens of Dwarka. And there was a verse that said that they were so attracted to those lotus feet, they could not quit his lotus feet. And just that phrase, it hit me, and I was like, wow. And I just noticed that I'm starting to become one of these Hare Krishnas. Because I like this. It sounds beautiful. The environment, the deities, the flowers, the incense, the exotic look of everybody, saris, dhotis, shaved heads, tilak, is just wild. Beyond compare. It's not from this world. Tadvag visargo janatak, different creation. But then I thought, I'm sucked in. I didn't think of it like that because I wanted to be sucked in, but I just remember the moment when I thought, this is beautiful. And it moved my heart, and I couldn't help it. And I didn't try. I just was a willing participant, and it just happened automatically. Not that I've moved the needle very much, but I do know that by the association of devotees and hearing the Bhagavatam, I experience it for myself. So this is the power of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It was the full intention of Śrīla Vyasadeva to bring it out to the world, and Prabhupada knew that that was the panacea. It was the only way to transform the whole world, and he writes about it himself in his preface and introduction, and also on the Jaladutta. And he spent most of his time, as he was simultaneously trying to get the full Krishna conscious movement established all over the world, writing thousands of letters and talking to disciples and dealing with interpersonal relationship problems, people absconding, as well as many other positive aspects which required management. He spent his time methodically writing Bhagavatam. He told Śrī Caitanya Prabhu, "See all these books behind me?" He said, "I've done this because of the principle of a drop a day wears the stone away." He said, "Every day I write something. Sometimes a few sentences, sometimes many paragraphs, but every day I write something." And that was his loving passion for his spiritual master, who told him, "If you ever get money, print books." And he dedicated himself to that order. But what book did he mostly put his heart and soul into? It was the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Because he knew that without the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, even without the 10th canto, why he stopped at the 4th canto temporarily so he could write the Krishna book, because he knew people had to have that in order to have the escape velocity to get out of the material world, have to hear the pastimes of Krishna. So we are the recipients. What has been bequeathed to us? One thing is the sound vibration of the Bhagavatam with Prabhupada's commentary, which is his emotional response to the Bhagavatam. And it's poetical language. It's prose, but it's poetical. It rings in the ear. I was thinking this morning when I was ringing that bell, and I missed one beat. And I was thinking of that phrase we have in English. Like, if somebody has a rejoinder that's really witty, you know, if somebody says some criticism and then somebody comes right back, you say, "He didn't miss a beat." And I was thinking, he didn't miss a beat. We're always calculating everything in terms of music. The whole material world, like it's a musical performance. Material world is mostly discordant, but the spiritual world is all music, and it's all rhythm. There it's Shreya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo Durma Bhumish Chintamani Ganamayi Tonyam Amritam Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivamshi Prayasaki. It's dancing music, all the sound vibration from the spiritual world. It's raga. Every gopi, and there are millions of gopis, has her own raga. And all the ragas in the world have emanated from the gopis, dances their own particular offering to Krishna. And every word is a song, every gate is a dance. Perverted reflection here in the material world. People hear the discordant sounds of the music here that drags them downward, whereas Prabhupada's purports are musical and they reveal the spiritual world. So that's what we've been given, but one more thing that's even, perhaps even more important. We were left with the opportunity to distribute the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. That is the most amazing opportunity, which is a very mundane way of saying anything. But it means that we have a stake in this. We've been given the opportunity to join the party that is responsible for distributing the sound vibration to the whole world. And that's what we've been given in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Both the opportunity for ourselves to hear it and go back to the spiritual world, and also to give it to everybody else in the world, in every single language, so that they can hear the music of the spiritual world and go back to Godhead. And now I'm going to stop for a minute and see if there's any reflections or if I ran out of time. Would you like to have a discussion?
Very much so.
Yes, okay. Prabhu?
Thank you so much. It's really appreciating the opportunity of trying to glorify Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and what we've been given. And over the last sort of few days, just before coming here, I was having a conversation with Vṛndāvana Prabhu that how is it that we can really popularize Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in UK, and what is it that we can do? And then while we were doing that, we came across a quote of Śrīla Prabhupāda, which I wanted to mention. It's very really appropriate. It is by Mula Prakriti Devi Dāsi. She was saying that Śrīla Prabhupāda gave me instruction about distributing books. First he asked me, what do you say? I explained, we tell the person, oh, you look like a spiritual person. This is a book from ancient India, it has so much knowledge. Śrīla Prabhupāda pulled out Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam from the rack, and slowly and carefully he read the verse. He said, this Bhagavad Puran is as brilliant as the sun. He said, this verse is so wonderful, if you just tell people this verse, how can they resist? You don't need to say anything else, the whole Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam will sell itself. Reference Memories of Anecdote of a Modern Day Saint, Volume 1 by Siddhanta Dāsa. So I was just thinking, and it's quite amazing because over the last few years, every year we set up a big show at Janmashtami. And we try and tell people that, and Vṛndāvana Prabhu as our Gomatsya leader who is really leading up the project so nicely. Every time I see him presenting the book, he starts with this verse and he ends with this verse actually. And I always find it so profound, and it just, when you say it's as profound as the sun and people look at you and think, really? So I just wanted to say that it's a very good opportunity, and there are so many of us from all over the Europe this year. And we are looking to increase our capacity of distributing Bhagavatam sets by at least 20%. And Bhaktivedanta Manor has taken the heaviest toll in the many years. I mean, this is our first time we are setting up a goal of 600 Bhagavatam sets at the Manor this year for the Bhadra Purnima. So I think it would be nice if we get more opportunity to talk about it, but it would be nice to hear from you what is the World Ayin Maharaj this year, because I thought one of the goals as part of the SMART goal exercise we have on the last day would be also nice to maybe give 10-15 minutes on brainstorming how we can really leverage on distribution of the Bhagavatam set in Europe. So just wanted to put that request to everybody here.
Oh, I agree. It's very important. In fact, just talking about the distribution of Bhagavatam, I think I mentioned it somewhere that we had this revelation several years ago about Bhadra Purnima, because for years we have been working towards Gita Jayanti. Gita Jayanti is a godsend that allows us to have a point in time through which we distribute thousands and thousands of Bhagavad Gitas around the world. Yeah, it's called World Gita Day now. But then we saw the Bhadra Purnima on the map. That's the day the Bhagavatam says when you give away a set of Bhagavatams, then you get the gift of going back home, back to Godhead. And we organized to some degree the distribution of Bhagavatams, and some centers in America, Canada, and India took it up in the UK to some degree. In the first couple of years, we were only able to do 7,000 sets worldwide. And if you consider how important the Bhagavatam is and how many people there are in the world, that seems like a almost non-existent number. And then, as I told before, we wanted to push it up to 10,000, which we made that goal in 2019 in Tirupati at the GBC meeting. But then the pandemic hit. But then it turned out to be a situation arranged by Kṛṣṇa, and we're actually able to do more than 10,000. It was like 23,000. But then in America, there's a game called football. It's different from football over here. There they like to smash their heads in and end up paralyzed by hitting each other as hard as they can. But it's a big thing for Americans because they like to smash each other. And after they win their championship and they're on the field, before the star player leaves the field, the press surround him and say, can you do it again next year? They just won the championship 2 seconds ago. And that's the way it is in spreading the Krishna Consciousness movement, because Prabhupada said, our goal is to go on preaching unlimitedly. And whenever we hit a milestone or a goal, the next question is, can you do it again next year? And that's how we live our lives, running scared every year. And so last year we set a goal at 25,000. Actually, yeah, it was last year, 2021. And miraculously, we were able to do over 35,000 worldwide. But right now, we always have to have a fresh goal, as Prabhupada said, so the devotees will want to rise up and hit it. So there's a couple of considerations. One is that we're duty-bound to proliferate the Bhagavatam around the world in every language. And 35,000, again, is almost a non-existent number compared to the number of people in the world. But we have to incrementally increase every year. So in the next 5 years, by 2026, we will develop the capacity around the world, if we all follow the plan, to distribute at least 100,000 sets of Bhagavatams in 1 year. But that means that everyone has to follow what Divyanam Prabhu says. And I'm proud to say that the European Yatra is the first one, as we're asking all 6 continents. We'll ask the 7th continent, Antarctica, if the penguins will cooperate with us. Although we need a spokesperson, a liaison to talk to them. But the 6 continents that are inhabited by humans, each one is a palette. And on it, we need to paint the picture of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam so that everybody can take advantage of it. So that's just in broad strokes, that's the plan, to continue increasing the Bhagavatam and come to these ever-increasing numbers of Bhagavatams distributed around the world. There's a lot more to say about it regarding the culture of follow-up, which means when people get Prabhupada's books, including the Bhagavatam, having the infrastructure in place so that they can immediately take to the Bhagavat culture and here in the association of devotees. But everyone has the opportunity to be involved in this because it's actually happening. Yes?
I just want to ask one, do we have a global goal for this year already?
Yes, we do. If I'm not incorrect, because we were going to have the launch today, but we'll put it off till next weekend because of various reasons. But it's we're doing it based on starting with the number 100,000 in 2026, which is we need to have the capacity to at least 100,000 worldwide. So we're working backwards from there. And I believe the number this year that we will hit is 43,000, I think, globally, is what we need to get to. If we're increasing at 20% increments on every continent, based on current numbers and trends.
I heard from devotees preaching in China that some years ago, the Chinese government, hardcore communists, they gave some money to print the Bhagavatam. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Chinese government helped print the Bhagavatam. I don't remember the details. But could you tell us your personal experience, like selling Bhagavatam, how you do it, what do you say, can you tell us something?
I can tell you a little something, but there are 4 laws of book distribution, and if you follow them, I guarantee you that you'll increase. And it applies to the Bhagavatam as well. The first is that your sadhana must be strong. And in the case of the Bhagavatam, it means distributing Bhagavatam should qualify yourself by chanting really good japa, actually great japa, and also following the 4 regular principles, etc. But you should also hear Bhagavatam as much as possible. I recommend that just as we have counter beads to count our japa, correct? Because if you see anybody walking around with a bead bag and no counter beads, you kind of wonder, right? Are you really part of the Krishna conscious movement? Or is this CIA or what? Everyone counts their japa. So my feeling is we should count our Bhagavatam reading also. To that end, Prabhu?
No, I'm back.
To that end, I created a system called Be a Sage Page by Page. It's started off as a little chart on a piece of paper that became popular enough for us to make it into an app. And the app is available right now on at the App Store for iOS and for, what's that other one?
Android.
Oh yeah, Android. And for Android, they're both available, and it's called Be a Sage Page by Page. You can download it for free. And it has a little picker wheel. You can turn to any of Prabhupada's books, and it tells, and then you can choose the amount of time that you want to finish a particular book, and it'll tell you how many pages a day you have to read in order to complete it. So it just so happens that if you read 41 pages a day of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, that you'll complete the whole thing within 1 year. So if you want to complete the year having finished the complete Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, just read 41 pages a day. It takes about 1 hour and 7 minutes average a day to do that, if you go through all the parts of the Bhagavatam. So I recommend that. And then that's the first law of book distribution. Second law is you have to get books. And we used to say you can't distribute books you don't have, but our French yatra proved us wrong. Exception to the rule. And actually, when we started talking about it, I remembered how in the early days, the devotees, especially from the library party, so-called library party, used to sell standing orders, which meant that the books weren't even written yet. Just the ones that were available they would buy, and they would promise to buy all the ones that would come out later. So there is a way in which to sell books you don't have, but it's best to get books as soon as possible, because when you have them and you then follow the next law of book distribution, which is the more you show, the more you sell. Because when you put items out into the open, little jiva sees them and then gets interested in them. What to speak of the Bhagavatam. So if you display it and show it to people, they'll take it. And finally, you must organize. You can always improve through organization, and you should make at least 3 improvements every month to whatever system you have now. And in that way, you can sell Bhagavatams. We sell Bhagavatams by going around and meeting people who are likely candidates, and then spending a little time with them, and then they make a commitment to take the Bhagavatam. And it works. It's working all over the world, including in New Zealand, where it's hard to find anybody, because there's so few people on the continent. They have to search to find even one person. And when they do, they show them the Bhagavatam, and they're selling sets of Bhagavatams. Every part of the world where people thought they couldn't sell Bhagavatams, for instance, Hong Kong, when they first got involved in the Bhadra Purnima, they said, oh, we've never sold Bhagavatam sets here. And they made a commitment to sell 1 set of Bhagavatams. But then they came back a week later and said, hey, we just sold 3. And then it was 14, then 23, then 37. Fiji, same sort of phenomena. So Krishna makes the arrangement when we decide that we want to distribute Bhagavatams. And I recommend it because it's a life-changing experience, not only for the recipient, but also for those who distribute Bhagavatam. Are there any other reflections or questions? Yes, please.
In fact, this question was asked by a friend when we were reading this verse, and I didn't know how to answer it. That Vyasadeva was empowered by Lord Krishna to write Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and then why would there be shortcomings in his writing?
Well, it's a process of revelation. The entire Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam starts with the Chaturshloki Bhagavatam. Ahame vasabe bhagre nanyat yat sarasat param pascharaham yeri tascha yo vishisheta sosmyaham. Krishna is talking to Brahma, and he just tells him 4 verses. And then from there it expands into the complete explanation. Are you going to say?
18,000 verses.
18,000 verses. Yeah, there are more verses on higher planets, and the Tattva Sandarbha Jiva Goswami says, what we humans have time for, here on this planet, especially if you're reading fewer than 41 pages a day, you better live longer, that higher planetary systems have much more expanded versions of the Bhagavatam. Some of them with many more verses than 18,000. Some of them have millions of verses. And I was wondering at the shipping cost of that type of thing. So we're kind of lucky in a way. We got the smaller version. Śrīla Vyasadeva, all of the empowered representatives of the Lord, it's a process of revelation that comes to bear in the world. You see even Lord Balaram in the past time of the Brahma Vimohana Lila. He doesn't know what's going on in Vṛndāvana. Krishna even kept him covered until a certain part where he started getting amazed at how attracted the cows were to their calves, and everybody else seemed to be a little more alacritous than usual. And he said, what's going on here? And then by degrees he started to realize, because Krishna removed the coverings of Yoga Maya from Balaram, showing that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead only, Kama only, and then he could realize by Krishna's grace, oh, Krishna, you're doing this. So Krishna has various circuitous ways of revealing knowledge to the world, and it's all purposeful. Someone may ask, what's Buddha doing anyway? And we get explanation of how there's a necessity at that particular time to bring knowledge that will pull people away from one thing and set them off in another direction. And Krishna sees the end game, that it's bringing them closer to the culture of the Bhagavat. So at different times there's necessity for various types of revelation to come out. Anything else about the Bhagavatam? Yes, Prabhu.
This morning, the class of Sutapa Prabhu was remarkable, to say the least. And it was so sweet when you really glorified his presentation. It was really so sweet. So I feel obliged to express the deepest gratitude for the presentation which we heard today, because this is like no need to go to any university anywhere. I mean, like what we heard today, this was all the Vedas, Puranas, Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, perfect purport and everything, and it's amazing. Everything unpacked in the most digestible way, clear. The essence is just in, I don't know, less than 2 hours. I don't know how long time passed, but it was brilliant, and I intend to study this for the rest of my life. Because the great thing is that because you insert the verses inside, so it's really like full course. It's not just the minikam, it's really like the whole curriculum is inside, so we can learn the verses, study and everything. So this is extreme opportunity which we get, and we need to capitalize on it. And in this regard, because often we think about the distribution of the books, and of course you stressed on that, but distributing Bhagavatam, like in many places, in some countries we have distributed a lot of books over the years, but the effect of the books is not proportional on the quantity of the books which we distributed. And this is for one reason that we do not develop community, and we do not really facilitate people to further cultivate these seeds, Bhagavatam. They are not qualified on their own to read and develop everything. So in this regard, I mean, obviously we need to read on our own, but we need to develop what you're doing, building communities and creating atmosphere in which regularly Krishna Katha is the culture, and it's presented in such a sweet way that people just come, and like when you went to the temple and you heard about the queens in Dwaraka, and then it captivated your heart, so that people come and then they get really enchanted by everything what we arrange for them to hear, and everything we arrange for their senses. So this is part of distribution of Bhagavatam, maybe the most important part, because many people, they are helpless. They get the book and they read something and then okay, enough. I mean, like, it's not for me. Or some people doesn't read at all. But and one I think it's appropriate to just to mention one remark regarding Bhagavatam, that like the Vedas, they teach like a teacher, and the Puranas, they teach like a friend, and poetry teaches like a lover, and Bhagavatam teaches in all these three ways. And it's really like, I mean, it's like, it's just experience which is uncomparable to nothing else in this world.
Thank you, as usual, for your unbounded enthusiasm, which is palpable.
It's reflected.
And I resonate with the idea of getting a PhD in the Bhagavatam, because oftentimes, people go to school, they think, I got to get an advanced degree, but you have to go through 99.9% complete nonsense, if not 100%, in order to, get to actually what you want. And you don't get very much. But if you read Bhagavatam, you get everything. It's all complete there. And I dare say we need more people in the world who are conversant with the Bhagavatam, who can speak it, go here, there, and everywhere. And I totally agree with the idea of building community based on the sound vibration of the Bhagavatam. Śrīla Prabhupāda and Raghunath have this wisdom of the sages. And I thought, their idea was, let's just present Bhagavatam. And they just read it every day. And they go through it and speak it. And then, wow, people get attracted. And it's like, can we be, they overcome all obstacles. Everything can be attained by Bhagavatam.